How you doing? This is Leo Lewis, and we are at Strive Bookstore in downtown Minneapolis, and I am so elated to be able to present to you and to introduce to you my guest, Professor Duchess Harris, who is from Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. We're here under the auspices of my Sport and Society collection of books, and we are so happy to be able to be here at Strive Bookstore to present to you a series of interviews. Duchess, thank you so much for coming. You know, one of the things that I'm very interested in when we first met several months ago was the fact that you really expound on the African American experience in America. And you and I had a conversation previously about the African American woman, particularly, and that's kind of the content that you're really writing about in this current state. Tell me a little bit about that experience, those experiences that you're talking about.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me in Strive Bookstore. This is fantastic. So I'm glad to be here. And so I've been on the faculty at Macalester for 30 years. And I'm in the American Studies Department. And what we do is contemporary issues like political science, but we also are historically grounded. And history departments often don't do the contemporary. So we're a blend. And so I have been writing about Black women in electoral politics, but also social activism, those of us who organize around electoral politics. That's really been the work of my career.
Good. And, you know, one of those things specific to societal and current trends is that particularly in sport, where the African American women's sports have become so prominent, and you know, even though that's not your focus, sports still is a view through a lens that really tells us a little bit about America. Can you tell me a little bit about some of those issues that you see around African American women in sport? Sure.
And I mean, I use women's sports figures all the time. I mean, as recently as Monday. So that was the beginning of the semester at University of Minnesota Law School. And I teach a course with Judge Maria Mitchell called Black Health Law. And one of the things we were talking about is when Serena Williams was giving birth to her first child, she almost died. And we talk about how even though she was a billionaire and even though she was one of the most recognizable faces in sports at all, but then if you narrow it down to women's sports, for certain, Black women, the most recognizable face. So everyone knows who she is, and the medical team would not listen to her. And so how we can have prominence in sports and we can be revered and we can be famous, we also still can be really vulnerable.
Well, I tell you what, that is always, you know, health, particularly among athletes, is always going to be a conversation point, particularly in our well-mixed media frontier. And one of the things that I've always liked about the fact that we can be more transparent about the issues confronting well-known athletes, we have to also understand that this is a societal issue among particularly all African American women.
For certain. And so Serena ended up being a symbol and then a spokeswoman for women who don't have her prominence, who don't have her wealth. How do you advocate for yourself so you don't have Black women have the highest infant mortality rates in the nation?
That's great. You know, one of the things that interests me in your resume is that you're well written, you're an author. You know, you focus on particular issues. Can you be a little bit more transparent about what are some of your favorite content areas when you're doing your work at Macalester?
Sure. I mean, most recently, one of the things that I've been doing was I was appointed to the Kamala Harris Project, which was the official research team for the vice president. It originated out of UCLA and then went to The Ohio State University. We had millions of dollars of funding, and we were tracking her political behavior, which I thought was really important because, of course, you'd never had a woman of color who was vice president. And even though she didn't make the bid for president of the United States, there's so much that we can learn about the resistance that people had to her candidacy, and it can help us move forward.
And you know, you see that in sport as well, where prominent Black athletes, if they're visible, if they now adopt this new found age of activism, there's a lot of pushback, particularly with anyone who has a voice
Sure.
in their community. So I think one of the things that I have found in our session of Sport and Society is that sports is transcendent. It goes across all demographics, all discussion points, and politics is one of those intersections that sport is also involved in. Is that kind of one of your interests too?
I mean, definitely. So I've written about Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
And I think about the resistance that he got when he was taking a knee when Black Lives Matter came to prominence, and how people talked about how inappropriate it was. So it's one thing to say that something is inappropriate, but you would know even better than I do how much money he lost, and also how that was perceived in different segments of the Black community. And so there were some people that stood with him, and then there were some people who were embarrassed by him. Now, if you fast forward to just this week, you have Elon Musk, right, making a sign that looks very much like, you know, Heil Hitler.
Correct.
And he is an advisor to the President of the United States.
Correct.
So somehow, if you're a Black man in sports and you try to support your community so that other Black men, you know, aren't killed by the police, that can disrupt your entire career.
Of course. And, you know, it is all about leverage. Who has the loudest voice? And it seems to be that connecting to money can help raise your voice a little bit more. And, you know, Colin just was not in a favorable position at that time when he had his action. But he did give a point to what I consider part of activism, but the cult of celebrityism, I guess you could say.
Sure.
Where celebrities still are having a louder voice than the normal citizen, and how that can be leveraged even for athletes of color.
Sure. We always end up being penalized for doing it, however, right? So if we take it back to Muhammad Ali speaking against the Vietnam War, he was at the top of his, you know, career, and then he gets marginalized. And if we take it back a little bit further than that, we think about the Olympics with the fist in the air, and you know, one of the athletes, his wife actually left him, and so we try to take certain social justice positions, but society often is not ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, there has been a backlash in the history of sport in America as well, and I think some of the current issues have been, the backlash has been to normalize this behavior so it doesn't become disruptive.
Right.
But, you know, in the course of your writing, you've been prolific in your writing. You do have a public face yourself.
Sure.
In that you've been involved with local and statewide officials. Tell me a little bit about that connection with politics.
Well, that's really been an exciting part of my work. When I was an undergrad, I used to wonder, will I be in politics or will I write in politics? So I have found a balance to do a little of both. And so locally, when I lived in Minneapolis, former Mayor Sharon Sells Belton had appointed me to be a Minneapolis Civil Rights Commissioner. And that was exciting work. That was before I'd gotten a law degree. So I was kind of like a lay commissioner. Like I couldn't really like weigh in on some of the stuff because I didn't have a law degree. And then after that, my first gubernatorial appointment was with Governor Ventura. And I was on the Council of Black Minnesotans. And then after that, Governor Dayton appointed me twice to be on the statewide Martin Luther King Committee, and then Governor Walz recently appointed me to the Board of Public Defenders. So being able to do that work and write about politics has been enjoyable.
Oh my gosh. And you've done it with some class because you keep getting asked to do these things over the years. I mean, you know, you were with the Wellstone team several years ago as well,
right.
You know?
Oh my gosh.
So I really applaud your efforts.
Thank you.
Respect.
Yeah, that was my first job. I was 23 years old, I think. So that was a great start.
Great. Well, Dr. Harris, I want to finish with this whole notion of the Duchess Harris collection. In that you do have several writings that involve sport in our society. So I'm really elated for you to share with us. I have a couple copies here, you know, and they're in dark face, but at the same time, this particular one is gender and race in sport. But we cross several topics.
Sure.
And I'm noticing that there are topics that I talk about in my course at the University of Minnesota. Tell me a little bit about what energized you to delve into sport in this way.
Sure. Well, this collection of books is different than my academic writing because there's two lines. So there's a middle school line and a high school line. And so these are written for high school students. And the reason why I wanted to write about sports is even though I know lots of girls and young women are involved in sports, because I write about women so much, I wanted to make sure that I also had a male audience. So I have 3 kids. I have 2 sons and a daughter. And so I said, you know, black boys, their reading has dropped off a lot in the last few decades. And so how can I get young black boys to read? Maybe if I write about sports. And so it was a great challenge for me because I was not an athlete. And so all of it for me was research. I didn't have any lived experience. And I enjoyed doing it. And what I've heard, these books are in libraries in all 50 states, that boys do check these books out and are attracted to them. And also, some public schools have them as a QR code, and you know, tendency now that young people like to read on their phones, you can read them on your phones too.
Well, it's the Duchess Harris collection, and I'm going to get me a copy of each one of these, but certainly we're going to make it available here in Strive Bookstore in downtown Minneapolis. And you know, one of the things that I think is incumbent of all of us who like to write and to focus on really specific things that we're interested in is that we need a support mechanism to help us get through these. So you have connections with other authors, production people who help publish your books and stuff. How's that going for your next book? Or is that in turn right now?
Oh my gosh.
Process?
Well, I'm so excited. So my next book is going to be with University of Arizona Press, and it's a collection of essays about Meghan Markle's relationship to race and her resistance to British colonialism. And so that's what I'm working on now. I like to do things that take us outside of the United States as well. I have a book for high school students on African American expatriates to Paris, which is an exciting topic for me. And I also have a book on how activists in Northern Ireland used the Southern Civil Rights Movement as a strategy. And so I compare Bloody Sunday in Selma to Bloody Sunday in Belfast.
That is so fabulous. Well, I'm a aficionado a lover of history. Let's put it that way. And I think we need to know our history and know our background. Professor Harris, thank you so much for coming to visit us.
I loved it. This was so much fun. Thank you.
And we look forward to talking to you some more. Thank you so much.
All right.